St. Luke. Someone in the crowd said to Jesus, "Teacher, tell my brother to share the inheritance with me." He replied to him, "Friend, who appointed me as your judge and arbitrator?" Then he said to the crowd, "Take care to guard against all greed, for though one may be rich, one's life does not consist of possessions." Then he told them a parable. There was a rich man whose land produced a bountiful harvest. He asked himself, "What shall I do? For I do not have space to store my harvest." And he said, "This is what I shall do. I shall tear down my barns and build larger ones. There I shall store all my grain and other goods. And I shall say to myself, now, as for you, you have so many good things stored up for many years. Rest, eat, drink, be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this night your life will be demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, to whom will they belong? Thus will it be for all who store up treasure for themselves, but are not rich in what matters to God." The Gospel of the Lord.
Sometime a few weeks ago, before I left to spend some time in Pennsylvania, we had to go through our friary, where Father Mike and Father John Mark and I live, and take inventory of all of the things that we have in there. It was, of course, for insurance purposes, so that way if there's a fire or a tornado or one of those, ice storms or whatever that we always have, and the house is damaged, the insurance company knows what's inside, and that way it can be covered. And that makes complete sense, I think. We're very protective of material things because material things have value. Some things have great financial value. I think other things have maybe not so much financial value, but certainly sentimental value. And even though we all understand in our hearts that things are things and they can be replaced if need be, we still go to great lengths to try to protect our belongings. Heck, I'm a poor Franciscan friar, but when I was on vacation last month, every time I had to spend a night in a motel, you better believe I took every last bag out of my car when I went into the hotel room, brought that in with me. Don't want anybody taking any of my stuff, breaking into my car or anything like that. I'll always lock my office when I'm not in it. I double check the friary doors before I go to bed. It's just a habit. Just a habit. Nobody wants to lose things that are important to them. Whether rich or poor, we take inventory of our stuff so that it can be protected. Okay, with that in mind, take a look at our gospel today. Someone tries to drag Jesus into a sort of a financial dispute, right? This gentleman, he tries to drag Jesus into this dispute between him and his brother, and they're arguing over inheritance. And Jesus basically says, "Friend, you've got the wrong guy here, okay? I can't settle this dispute. All I can tell you, something that's more important than settling your dispute, all I can tell you is that you need to guard against the greed which can so easily possess a man." And then Jesus goes on to tell this parable about the man who has to keep building bigger and bigger barns to store his abundant harvest and all of the things that he's accumulated. And although the man is very pleased, the man in the parable, of course, is very pleased with the nest egg that he's built, God reminds him, you fool, your life can be taken from you at any time. And of course, none of this will go with you. So, are you rich in the things that matter to God? Are you rich in the things that matter to God? And that, I think, is the question that we all need to be asking ourselves. Sure, I think there's a dimension of this gospel that could kind of push us to take a long, critical look at our own lives, see maybe how we can downsize, how we can simplify our own existence, how can I divest myself of my attachments so that I might feel maybe a greater sense of unity with Christ, who of course came into this world without possessions and encouraged all of his followers to go out without possessions. So that's one element, I think, of this gospel that we're called to reflect upon. But really, I think that the question to be asking ourselves here is the question that is implied at the end of this parable, and that is, okay, I've spent plenty of time in my life taking inventory of my material possessions, my financial assets, my investments, my inheritance, so on and so forth. I've gone out of my way to take note of all of these things and protect them, but have I spent anywhere near the same amount of time taking inventory of and protecting my spiritual goods, my spiritual assets, my spiritual inheritance? You know, many of us are quick to rejoice in a financial gift that we've been given, but are we as quick or as ready to rejoice in a charism or a talent that we've been given by God to use for his glory? Many of us are very eager to keep very close records of the vacation days that are allotted to us that we've earned over years of working. Are we as quick to protect Sunday as a Sabbath day set aside for worship? Most of us go to great lengths to find the insurance that will best protect our homes, our vehicles, even our bodies from accidents, disasters, disease. Are we as quick to protect our souls from the scourge of sin and evil, which of course threatens us every single day? I suppose that if you're anything like me, and you're truthful when posing those questions to yourself, the answer is oftentimes no. No, I don't treat the spiritual goods as being as important as temporal and physical goods. And then the question that I think that we then have to ask ourselves is why? Why is this the case? If the things that I collect and own in this life won't follow me into the next, why do I treat them as being somehow of an elevated importance? They're more important even than that which endures, which of course is my immortal soul. So here's my advice for today. Take a moment in your personal prayer. Maybe even a moment of quiet after Mass. I know we're always kind of running out to the parking lot to get out of there before everybody else, but maybe a moment after Mass, maybe some quiet time at the end of the day, if you have that opportunity, maybe even a moment before the Blessed Sacrament and adoration, and take spiritual inventory. Take spiritual inventory. What are the good gifts that God has given me? What are my spiritual gifts? What are my talents? Am I using these things for his glory? If I have a gift of teaching and preaching, am I actually using it? If I have a gift of wisdom and prophecy, am I using it? If I have a gift of prayerfulness and contemplation, am I using it? Then take note of all the things that God wants us to possess and preserve: charity, patience, chastity, meekness, gentleness, prudence, temperance, joy, peace, faith. And ask yourself, how have I protected these things? How have I protected these things? In what ways have I guarded these things against the world, the flesh, and the devil? In what ways have I sought to preserve these things, these gifts of the Holy Spirit, throughout this life until I reach the next? We're very quick to preserve all of our material goods. Am I preserving these spiritual goods? And of course, this isn't a one and done exercise, right? We don't just do this once and say, well, that was fun, I'll never do that again. This is the type of thing that I think as Christians, it's incumbent upon us to be doing this pretty consistently. You know, some would call this type of prayer to be a sort of, I don't know if you've heard this word before, examine a prayer. It's a spiritual exercise that was kind of developed by St. Ignatius of Loyola, in which we would end each day by doing precisely this, taking inventory of the gifts that God has given us, acknowledging how we have failed to safeguard those gifts, and then asking for God's help to do better the next day. Because, of course, that's a Christian life, right? Acknowledging where we have failed, promising to do better. And, of course, you can be as formal or informal with this type of prayer as you would like to be. I know that myself personally, almost every time I sit down to pray, I can't help but kind of go into this mode where I'm doing this examination of conscience. What have I done? What have I failed to do? Where have I appreciated the gifts that God has given me? And where have I neglected those gifts, or perhaps even allowed those gifts to be destroyed or neglected? And then take all of that, as we all should, to the confessional, right? Because it's good to do an examination of conscience, but it should never just stay right there. The confessional is the next logical step. And I promise you, even priests go to confession too. As much as I would like to, I can't just absolve myself in the mirror, you know? That would be fantastic, but I don't have to wait in as long of a line, though, often. But, you know, regular confession is an important part of keeping spiritual inventory for any Catholic. As a matter of fact, I would go as far as to say you really can't keep spiritual inventory if we're not going to confession regularly. And you know, you probably heard that we're required as Catholics to go to confession at least once a year. But I think that we should probably strive for more than that. You know, at least every few months, to get in that habit of taking that spiritual inventory, being honest with ourselves, and then, of course, approaching Jesus and his mercy and the sacrament of reconciliation so we can continue to grow and improve and have the grace that we need to do so. And to go to confession, of course, it's not something that we do out of scrupulosity or fear, but it is, simply put, a response to the gospel that we hear today. If we're willing to so often think about all of these worldly possessions that we have, and so many of these things are good things, right? If we think so often about these worldly possessions, shouldn't we be just as eager to consider our spiritual possessions and then to ask God's forgiveness for the times that we haven't appreciated those possessions, or perhaps we failed to protect those possessions? Because after all, we all know it to be true that the boat and the Porsche, the Tesla, the outdoor patio, the financial portfolio, they don't get stuffed into the coffin with us when our time here comes to an end. They don't fit in the columbarium niche, no matter how hard you try. They're not raised on the last day along with our glorified bodies. It's the spiritual goods, the spiritual gifts that endure. So let's be mindful of them, as those are the things that make us truly rich.